Hey, our worship team has left the set, but would you thank them for their leadership today? It's a great set of music and a perfect way to get us into today. I mean, we are not here unless we believe that the Jesus that we serve who's alive is a waymaker and that he today is going to change your life as we open up God's word. That's what we believe. I'm excited. We're in the third week of the series Alive, where we're looking at Jesus, all the eyewitness accounts that saw Jesus alive. Amazing stories, and I hope you're going home and you're looking at these. But as I was getting ready for this weekend, I was spending a lot of time with my son on Zoom and on FaceTime and on text. And here's why. Our son is obsessed with football. I mean, obsessed. And it started when he was in middle school and he was too small to play, so he got really smart at it. And it stuck. And even though he's in medical school, kind of his side gig is writing for the Texans Wire. So the draft was a big deal this week, and we were watching it. And, you know, I get sucked into the draft because it's strategy. It's very interesting to me to see how people evaluate how does this player with their skills and passions fit into the coach's scheme and the player's skill. How does that all work together? And this year was really fun. Of course, there were fans back again, and they were wearing the right color mask according to their team. But it was so fun to see the fans so excited about these players as they got called. But by far the best part of the draft for me is the players and their stories. I love watching mom and dad get up beside their son and their dream is coming true. It's so powerful. And so many times there is something that happened to them that inspired them. Maybe it was a mentor or a challenge they had, or maybe it was a family heartache or sacrifices that they had to make to get there. Well, it looks like the Eagles, of course, did pretty well. I don't know how many Eagles fans we have in the room. I hesitate to ask because I know we've got a little divided line, but they did pretty well. They got the Heisman Trophy winner. But I got to say, for me, my affections, it's going to be a surprise to you, but my affections, rather than going south, are going to end up going north because the Buffalo Bills pick my guy, okay? This is a great edge player, and yes, a demon deacon, Boogie Basham. Look out for him, Buffalo Bills. So I'm going to be cheering for the Buffalo Bills this year. It's kind of crazy. Is that a team? I mean, anyway. I hope your favorite team got their favorite picks. If we were doing a draft today of the disciples, Thomas would not go in the first round. He wouldn't. But Thomas has this incredible story, and I hope today, it's a story that really resonates with me, and I hope that today, by the end of the service, it will resonate with you, and that God will use it to show his faithfulness in your life. Last week, Mark led us to the room behind closed doors with the disciples, and Jesus appeared to those disciples, and he brought them peace, and he brought them his presence, and he brought them power. But there was one guy who was missing, and what a week to miss. The other disciples, of course, tried to explain to Thomas, but he was having none of it. He just couldn't believe until he saw it. Here's what he says, Gospel of John. He says, unless I see the nail prints in his hands, unless I put my finger where the nails were and put my hand into his side, I will not believe. Now, it's really easy to bust on Thomas. We know him as Doubting Thomas. But really, the other times he shows up in the Gospels, he really is more like practical Thomas than Doubting Thomas. He's the guy who always asks questions. He could be a Lehigh graduate. He has this engineer kind of thing going for him. Let me give you some examples. Right before Jesus was crucified, he was teaching the disciples, and he said, hey, I'm going to be leaving, and you already know where I'm going. And it was Thomas who had the brain and the guts to say, actually, Jesus, we don't know where you're going. We don't know the formula. We haven't figured that out. See, Thomas is a guy who wants to know the truth. And maybe you're like that. Thomas just couldn't believe until he saw it for himself. Now remember, no one expected Jesus to be alive. N.T. Wright gives some really great historical background. This is what N.T. Wright says. He says, the resurrection of Jesus took everybody by surprise. The disciples weren't expecting it. They knew perfectly well that if you followed someone who you thought was the Messiah and he got killed, then that was it. We know at least a dozen other messianic or prophetic movements within 100 years on either side of Jesus. They routinely ended with the death of the founder. And if the movement wanted to continue, they didn't say, oh, he's been raised from the dead. They said, let's find his brother or cousin who can carry on this movement. This one did it differently. They had James, the brother of Jesus, as this great leader of the early church, but nobody said James is the Messiah. They said Jesus is the Messiah. Why? He's dead. They got him. Don't you realize they crucified him? No. He was raised from the dead. The disciples saw Jesus alive. That's what it took for them to believe it. But Thomas missed it, and we really don't know why he missed that day. So now, 1 week later, 8 days after Jesus came out of the tomb, the disciples are together again. And once again, they're behind a locked door. They don't know what to do. And here's what it says. It's John chapter 20. If you've got a Bible, go ahead and open that. And John 20, beginning in verse 24, here's what it says. A week later, his disciples were in the house again, and Thomas was with them. Though the doors were locked, Jesus came and stood among them and said, "Peace be with you." Then he said to Thomas, "Put your finger here. See my hands. Reach out your hand and put it in my side. Stop doubting and believe." Thomas said to him, "My Lord and my God." Then Jesus told him, "Because you've seen me, you've believed. Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed." Timing is everything, isn't it? I mean, Jesus could have shown up the day after Thomas missed out. Jesus could have shown up at Thomas's house, but he didn't do that either. Jesus came to Thomas when he was with the other disciples a week later. And I love that, because when we doubt, it's often being with our other friends who love and know Jesus. It's when we're with them, when we're with the community, that Jesus shows up and we know that he's real. Community is so important. But Jesus, once he shows up, he doesn't waste any time. Hey to the rest of you, but I'm here for Thomas. You're the guy I came to see. And when Thomas sees the nail prints of Jesus, everything changes. Those wounds that he sees are the proof that Thomas needs. Jesus is alive. It's not a myth. It's not historical fiction. Jesus died on the cross on Friday, and on Sunday, that tomb was empty. Jesus is not just another dead teacher the way Buddha is, or the way Muhammad is, or the way every other founder of every world religion is. You know, everyone gives Thomas a hard time because he didn't believe before he saw Jesus. But hear this. The other disciples believed because they saw Jesus. I mean, even the empty tomb wasn't enough for them. They had seen the marks of the nails in his hand. They'd seen the wound in his side. It was not someone pretending to be Jesus. That is him. The whole point is that Thomas and those other disciples see the same Jesus who they had seen crucified. Jesus is alive. And that alive Jesus looks straight at Thomas and says, "Stop doubting and believe." Now, in Greek, you could translate that a little bit more clearly. It really should say, "You have believed in me, Thomas. Now, keep believing in me. Continue believing in me." Now, Thomas was the last holdout. But Thomas actually makes the most complete confession of faith in the whole Gospels, in all the Gospels. He says, "My Lord and my God." He's the first person in the whole Bible to look Jesus of Nazareth in the eye and say, "Jesus, you are God. You're God." And it's not only true what he says, it is profoundly personal. He says, "My Lord, my God." When you say Jesus is my Lord, it's personal and it's singular. You can only have one Lord over your life. Once Thomas sees this alive Jesus, he has a decision to make. Jesus can't just be a nice guy or a really good teacher. He can't be the one who you care just enough about to come to church, or you go to only when things are really bad. Thomas came into that room that day, and he had a story. See, he didn't just doubt Jesus was alive. He had his own wounds. Like every one of the disciples, he had denied and betrayed Jesus. He had disappeared during the crucifixion. He had deserted Jesus. And he had broken things in his life like all of us do. He had sin in his life like all of us do. And none of that was a surprise to Jesus. And still, Jesus showed up for Thomas. Now, nothing was a surprise. Jesus already knew what Thomas had said. He knew that he said, "Unless I see the wounds and unless I touch them." Jesus already knew that. He said, I don't believe. But Jesus came anyway. Jesus already knew what his wounds were. He already knew what his doubts were. He knew everything about him. Now, it'd be so hard if we didn't have this story. I was talking to someone between service. I'm like, I'm so glad we have this account of Thomas. I mean, can you imagine if Jesus had just said, "Well, I already showed up to the rest of the disciples. It doesn't really matter that I see Thomas. They'll convince him." That's not who Jesus is. Jesus cares about the one. Jesus cares about Thomas. Jesus cares about you. You know, if you look really closely, I know we're not doing a lot of close things these days, but if you got close enough to me, you could see in the right corner of my eye I have a scar. And I got it when I was about 11 years old, and I was on a trampoline, and we were having this competition of who could bounce the most, and I collided with a friend of mine, and I'll always have it forever, and a fun story. I also have a really big scar on my back where I had 2 back surgeries. And this past year, I was on my bike and I lost a fight with the curb, and I have a broken elbow. And you would never see that scar. It's inside unless you had an x-ray. And you know what? I've got other scars in my life. And if you keep getting closer to me, you'll see them. I have things that have happened to me that have been hard. Wounds that I have. Now, I don't know how you came into the room today. I don't know how you're doing at home. I don't know all your stories. I don't know what wounds you have on the outside of your body, and I certainly don't know all the wounds that you have on your inside. But Jesus does. Just like he knew Thomas, and he knew what he needed. He knows you, and he knows me. He knows your doubts, and he knows your fears, and he knows the questions you have, and he knows the wounds that you have. He knows everything about you. A couple years ago, I heard a Chick-fil-A operator speak, and he shared this story, and it's this video, and it's a video that they use for training at Chick-fil-A, and it made such an impact on me. Some of you have seen it, but I wanted all of you to see it. It's really powerful. Here it is. Everyone has a story. Everyone has wounds. And with hundreds of people watching, I couldn't even imagine all the wounds that are out there. Some of you have some pain in your life and secrets in your life that no one else knows about. Some of you are so lonely, you're so broken that you don't even know where to start. Some of you have some regrets that you have and missed opportunities that you wish you could get back. I mean, maybe you look really good on the outside, but if people only knew, if they could see deep down inside of you, if they could read your mind. Others of you you want more. It's been a hard year. You're bored. You're not satisfied. And this past year, when you've been stuck at home, you've had all this time to rewind and think about all your wounds. Well, Jesus gets it. See, that's why he came. He doesn't just know your wounds, he understands your wounds. Jesus came into the room that day and he understood what was going on with Thomas. He understood what was going on with the other disciples. See, Jesus had his own wounds, so he gets it. He wasn't a God that never experienced pain. Not only did he have the wounds in his hands and in his side, I mean, Jesus had been betrayed. He'd experienced separation from his Father. He had all kinds of pain. He understands wounds. On the cross, he suffered and he died. He experienced all of it. Yesterday, it was so good to see those 4 astronauts splash down safely from their long visit up in the space shuttle. I don't take that for granted when we see those astronauts appear. Of course, just 2 weeks ago, we celebrated another anniversary of the Apollo 13 mission that almost didn't end well. Maybe you remember how that happened. It was a routine check-in on the oxygen tanks, and a fire sparked, and the ship started losing oxygen out into space. And so the astronauts had to scramble, and they got themselves to this part of the ship that was designed to be landed on the moon. But there was a problem. They didn't have much oxygen. So they quickly started turning off everything they could to conserve power, but still there was another problem. All these men were close together and they were producing too much carbon dioxide. Not enough oxygen and too much carbon dioxide. Down at Mission Control in Houston, the engineers, they got their heads together, and the engineer in charge of the group said, hey, we've got a square filter and it's got to fit into a circular hole. And here's everything we have to make that work. And amazingly, they did it. They figured it out. This is the contraption that they designed. And it worked. It saved the astronaut's life. Without it, they could have never returned home. Jesus showed up with his wounds in the presence of their wounds. He showed up to fix it. See, he was the only fix for Thomas's wounds. He had gone to the cross. He gave his life. And then he conquered death. And he conquered sin. And he conquered pain and wounds. He's the only fix for Thomas. And the only fix for you. There's quite a difference between the first time Jesus shows up and the second time, even more than just Thomas not being there the first time and being there the second time. Maybe you noticed it. The first time, Jesus invites them to see the wounds. But the second time, he goes a step further. He doesn't just show Thomas the wounds. He invites Thomas to get close enough to touch the wounds. What an invitation. He invites him to get close enough to touch. And that's an invitation he wants you to have today. Jesus invites you to get close to him. To get close to him. If you call out to Jesus, he's with you. All you have to do is ask. And Jesus doesn't, when you ask, he doesn't run away from your wounds. He actually runs toward them. He's not scared off by your hurt or by your missed opportunities or your sin. He's there. And he wants to be there with you. Jesus' wounds on the cross that he got on the cross are the only thing that can meet your greatest need and your deepest wounds. They're the only thing that can lead you to a life-changing confession like Thomas made. Only when you know the alive Jesus can you say, my Lord and my God. See, Jesus' wounds meet your wounds. Now it's amazing. Jesus showed up that day. He showed up that day and he changed not only Thomas's past, but he changed his present and he changed his future. And here's why, and here's how. See, Thomas is always going to have someone to talk to. and someone to deal with him. Someone who could come into your life and change him and change you and even use your wounds for good. When you say, my Lord and my God, you have someone who will be with you through everything. Through everything. Don't miss out. See, Jesus wants to do something in your life today. See, he went out of his way to meet Thomas that day, but he's still doing that. He's still going out of his way. He's still showing up. And there's so many things we've missed out on this past year. But you don't have to miss out on the thing that will change your life forever. See, Jesus stands alive, and he stands ready for his wounds to meet your wounds. We're about to take communion together. And when we do that, we remember that Jesus experienced wounds. That when he gave his life on the cross, his body was broken and his blood was shed. But when we take communion, we're also saying that it changes us. That because of what Jesus did, our life can be different. Our wounds can be faced. Our doubts can be walked alongside. As we get ready for communion, I want you to take just a moment. It's so good to be prepared for communion. The scripture says we should be prepared. So I want you to take just a moment. The band's going to come up. But I want you to take just a moment and let God work in your life. Go ahead and ask Jesus. Ask Jesus to be at work in your life. And here's something really risky. Would you invite Jesus to be the Lord of your wounds? Would you invite him to take them and hold them with you and change your life? Take a moment, bow your heads, and let's get ready for communion.